welcome everybody to our panel. We're going to be discussing kind of historical colonialism and neocolonialism in the context of research that's being done in entomology and insect decline. And we're joined by several amazing panelists today who are working on entomology kind of very broadly across the world, really. And we're lucky to have them. And so we thought we would begin just with some introductions so you can get to know who the panelists are. And I'll start, please, with Dr. Gyanpriya Maharaj.
Good morning, everyone. You can call me Priya for short. I am an entomologist. My area of specialty is neotropical butterflies, and I specifically work in Guyana. I am the director for the Biodiversity Center there, and I also work within the Department of Biology, where I do genetics and entomology. I'm currently in Chicago visiting the Field Museum here, but most of my work is usually done within my country. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Dr. Angelo Pinto?
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelo Pinto, of course. I'm professor in the Department of Zoology in Federal University of Paraná in southern Brazil. We have a huge collection of insects, more than 7 million of specimens. Currently, I am curator of aquatic insects order here, also the general curator of our invertebrate collection. And today I am vice coordinator of our graduate program in entomology. We have projects focused mainly on aquatic insects, but my specialization is on dragonflies. I am happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelo. Mr. Eric Stoll?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Stoll, and I work at the Biodiversity Center here in Guyana at the university within their dry collection. And my main focus of study is general insect diversity.
Thank you. Wonderful to have you here. Melissa Sanchez Herrera?
Hello. Sorry, my internet is being a little buggy right now, but my name is Melissa Sanchez Herrera. I am originally from Colombia. I'm currently doing a postdoc at University of Alabama. My target taxa is dragonflies and damselflies. My expertise is mostly neotropical damselflies. But I also work in a lot of different insect-related kind of work. I'm the chair of the Neotropical Working Group for increasing the monitoring in the neotropical region, where I have the chance to interact with a lot of these folks of the neotropical region. And I'm also here in Colombia right now doing an outreach for insects. So that's the reason my internet is being a little weird. But yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez Herrera. And Dr. Lafia Azizat?
Yeah, thank you. Just like she said, my name is Alafia Azizat Oyindamala. I am a lecturer in the Lagos State University at the Department of Zoology and Environmental Biology. And I've been working with odonate, of course, dragonflies and damselflies. And I collaborate with a lot of odonatologists in Nigeria. And we've been doing a lot of collections of insects, especially the dragonflies and damselflies, and of course we do some collections of butterflies too. I am very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all. Really, what a heartfelt welcome to have you here. So we'll just go ahead and jump in. And one of the questions that the panelists and I thought would be promote some interesting discussion was the following. And I'll maybe start with you, Priya. In your experience working at an institution in the Global South, how do you feel it affects the type of data and the analyses that you do in your work?
Thanks, Jessica. So I think when you look at that question, there's the opportunity portion of it, and then there's a challenges portion of it. Opportunities. We are in one of the most diverse areas within the world. So there are so many opportunities in terms of collection, regardless of whatever group that you work with. And in Guyana, for example, we do have large swaths of forest. More than 80% of the country is actually forested. But in addition to that, you have seasonally flooded savannas, you have mangrove forests, you have ecotone areas. So there's a diversity of habitat types that allows for this great diversity. So that being said, when it comes to the challenges that we face when it comes to collecting data and the analysis that we do, there are two major challenges. The first one is that to get into the interior portions of the country, it's extremely expensive. And so a lot of the research that has been done has been one-off studies. So we don't have data that has been collected for a long period of time for us to generate trend data. So that's one of the problems that we've had. The second bit is that we have been studying a lot of what we have collected on a species and somewhat ecosystem level, but very little work has been done on the genetic level simply because we do not have the availability of lab resources to do that kind of work. And that brings in also the constraints when it comes to paying for certain programs for ourselves and for our students. So a lot of what we do, we would try to find freeware, which sometimes isn't exactly user-friendly as you would have the ones that are, that you pay for. But I think those are the major opportunities and challenges that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists share some of Priya's thoughts or have other things that they find, challenges and opportunities working in your countries or in your ecosystems? Melissa?
Yeah, so as Priya have said, I mean, we share part of this big diversity of ecosystems here in Colombia. And I mean, there's an opportunity to see all of this, but at the same time, because there is a lot of this diversity, and as the same thing as Priya, there is places where you have to go to the country where it's expensive to travel to. And there is also the lack of resources from our governments, or at least in Colombia, from our government to give us the ability to do this big kind of projects. So there might be initiatives to go and explore. So there's been a lot of initiatives to give money to support scientific diversity and biodiversity to go and explore different places through the government and through the national institutions. But at the same time, it's hard to make those monitoring programs. So you can go and you can see what is out there. So there's going to be a lot of species discovery, and there's going to be a lot of these things happening. Also in particular group of insects, because there's also that. There is not enough taxonomies across the whole breadth of insect taxonomy or the tree of life of insects. So there's going to be ones that are more represented because there's just more people in country working towards that. And there's a lot of this big discoveries and this a lot of contributions from students, universities that are trying very hardly to get this. Here in Colombia particularly, there is a big input of private universities into research, because it's hard to get the government money because you're not only competing within the biology, you're also competing with chemistry, physics, the whole STEM field in order to do your projects. So it is competitive, it's hard, and plus we need a lot of time to see trends. That is going to be expensive work, that is going to requires a lot of different equipment. So we can think about, and also one of the other things that I think it's also important is that, there is those challenges in terms of taxonomical knowledge for a lot of these groups. And there is the financial burden that we cannot get to that. And depending on where country you're sitting down, there's also the fact that there is the policy making, so permits, getting the permits on rule. How do you get those permits? If you're doing molecular work or not doing molecular work, that's been something that has been a lot of bring a lot into attention in Colombia. And I remember when I did my first molecular work, I had to do like a contract with the government because I was accessing natural resources in terms of genetics. The regulations have changed in order that for biodiversity or genetic diversity through a study doesn't necessarily mean that you're accessing the resource to get something out of it. But that's something that throughout our history in trying to understand genetic diversity is going to hinder and make a little the step more challenging and harder in order to get that opportunity to look and assess and say, let's look at trends. Mm. And just as a final spot, I mean, a lot of the methodologies that we do here are replicates of whatever is done in the temperate zones. And sometimes just our ecosystems do not function or do the same, like we don't have big summers. We have maybe rainy seasons, we have maybe dry seasons. So the amount of time that we have in the field might be restricted depending on where we are. Like there's places here that rains the entire year, and you might not see. So in order to see a lot of things, you need to be in the field for a longer time. It's just those kind of challenges in terms of what the ecosystems you're trying to assess in the breadth of this diversity that we have, because it's like from deserts to high elevation Paramo to like the big dense rainforest. So it's kind of that kind of thing that makes it also very challenging to be thinking about having trend data monitoring in a country like mine, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any other thoughts from Alafia or Eric or Angelo? Alafia?
Yeah, I think well, over here, at least in Nigeria, the permit is no problem. Like you want to do studies, you can just go into the woods, you can do whatever it is. But most people are really not interested in insects generally, except those are of agricultural importance or medical importance. And then no other group of insects really matters to anybody. Whatever study you're doing, that you can get funding for them because really, it's like it doesn't really matter to most people. And then another thing is that for most of us, there are no trained taxonomists, and that's really, and the museum staff to keep the collections safe. And so over time, we've done a lot of collections, and some of them have you just had to throw them away based on the fact that we didn't have, and some of them are yet unidentified species. So you can imagine with the decline, and we haven't even identified those that we have. And this, and this keeps going on and on. But then, well, basically I think entomology is something that is still at its inception over here. It's not really widely acceptable, except for those insects, like I mentioned. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that point. Well, maybe we could move on to go ahead, Angelo, please.
No, so I see so far many points of similar points with the talk from Melissa, from other panelists, but I will also complain about some aspects, of course. I think Brazil is a little bit distinct from other countries here in South America because we have a long tradition in taxonomy, systematics. Our institutions, I think, is oldest than other countries. So we have somewhat consolidating agencies for funding, well-established policies to promote scientific development. But we have the same problem that Melissa said, is very competitive, is competing with other fields, not only on biodiversity, but other areas of investigation. But this tradition here, for example, my graduate program was funded 60 years ago, for example. We received many students from all Latin America for making our projects. But I think we have many barriers. For example, the language, as you can see from my conversation. But I think the greatest limitation or barriers are the long-term research. We have to obtain funds for this long-term research, mainly in our phylogenomic area today. For example, we have skills, we have the knowledge, but we don't have the money to conduct some type of research. Here, we need to publish, for example, in mega journals or journals with high impact factor. And today, we are moving for pay to read, for to pay to publish. And the article, then the article process charge is too expensive to us. Just a little example. I don't like to extend my talk, but the biggest grant here in Brazil for a group of research, maybe 10 research at least, is about of $60,000, only $60,000. So how you can conduct high impact research with this money? It's impossible. That is the point. So thank you.
Good. That's, yeah. I mean, I imagine this exacerbates historical inequities if then the rich get richer if you can afford to do high impact research and get it published. I'll turn to Eric and ask our second question, which is, do you think that we have reports of insects being in decline, kind of global studies, but as Priya mentioned, many of these studies, these are kind of like the studies that Priya was talking about, one-off studies, here and there. Do you notice in your work specifically, have you noticed any sort of insect decline or the impact of insect decline on the types of insects that you're processing, Eric?
Yeah, so in terms of insect decline within Guyana and the region, I don't think there's the information there to even monitor the changes because so much work has not been done. And sometimes the species, they've declined, we don't know. We never even knew they existed, and now they're gone and we don't know. So I think we don't have like the sort of manpower capacity or funding, because I don't think entomology work is well funded within my country. It's mostly the vertebrates, and I would call butterflies the charismatic megafauna of entomology. Sorry, Dr. Maharaj, but stuff like that gets more to funding in terms of, okay, we're going to study that, we've been monitoring that, but other types of insects, they're less funded, and we don't keep track or monitor any of those species, and that's bad. So we can't really note any decline. We can say maybe there is a decline, but we don't know. We're just guessing because we've seen trends in other places where they're measuring this data, but we don't know locally.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any other perspectives from some of the other panelists? How has insect decline affected your work or in your region, if you have those data, or is it like what Alafia, you were saying that the specimens before they can be identified sometimes are eaten or destroyed by before that can be documented?
Yeah, definitely. That's been one of the major problems. And then for the fact that we don't have enough taxonomists, so it's become very difficult to even understand if there's a trend in the decline. But generally, just like we have all over the world, there's been a decline in the butterfly population that is not particularly coming from study, but from observation. And a lot of people do agree with me that there's been a decline in the butterfly population. But the diversity, we don't know. We don't know if there's a trend. And then, of course, with this lack of data, it becomes very difficult for us to actually tell what the trend is like. Maybe at some point in the seasons, we have more of them or few of them. We don't have all this data on, and so it's very difficult for us to tell, particularly if there has been any particular trend in the decline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, Melissa? Or sorry, Priya.
Melissa can go first, and then I can come in.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, I think people here, I talk with a lot of my colleagues in entomology here in Colombia, that we notice there's kind of like when we go to the field, that we have been able to go to places like many years, you know, that you visit this place and this place and this place, you kind of see changes, and you can see that there are some species that are more difficult to find, or there is maybe there's just one that suddenly just like, oh my God, why is this here now? But it's like, because the lack of our ability to create like real monitoring programs, it's like we kind of notice, but then at the same time it's like, well, that's cool, but how do we make it how can we translate these observations into some paper?
Yes.
I'm not actually kind of, you know, get to kind of visit these frequently, have the students. Sometimes you have been lucky and have students that will put their own money, like I did a lot of my time when I was a undergraduate student, that I will go to this place to check and go every 15 days, but that's expensive. So that's kind of the reason. I think people here in Colombia have noticed, and a lot of people that are consulting, because somehow like there's environmental consulting about biodiversity, and here in Colombia, at least butterflies have made it to the point where they are part of this. And some of these people can get into seeing some things by collecting stuff, but then some of this data cannot be released, for instance. So because they just gather it for a specific project of like infrastructure project that they wanted to see what is there, and they needed to do it because the government suggests that you do, but then you kind of not, it's kind of data there, but it's like not used for the purpose. So it's also a lot of collection of without non-purpose information that may have a purpose, but we don't know where it is, or it's not available for a lot of scientists. So there's a lot of hidden information. There is definitely something, and every time that we go out, we can tell you something is going on from our experiences, but there's not something that we can say and put in the paper and say, this is the statistics, or this is our validation, or this is the trend that we're seeing, because we cannot actually measure it in a very practical and continuous way.
It sounds like the bureaucracy combined with historical inequities have kind of added to the challenges. Priya, sorry, I cut you off before. Please go ahead.
No, a lot of what Melissa said, actually, I was actually going to say quite a few of that, because that happens a lot. And because I do study one of the species that everybody kind of looks at, the group that everybody looks at, you would have people saying to you, oh, you know what? I don't see the big blue butterfly anymore. We used to see tons of them every time we would go into certain areas, and now we can't see them anymore. And it's wonderful to have all of this anecdotal data from, you know, the persons who live within these communities, but it would be wonderful to have a systematic way that we can monitor these species. And one of the things that Melissa brought up that I actually think is something that we need to do a little bit more of within the Global South is that I think we need to do more citizen science, where we have persons involved in monitoring the species that are within their communities. I know within Guyana, we don't do that a lot. Sometimes maybe someone who's doing graduate work may work with a community, but then after they're gone, then that work stops. You know, it would be wonderful to have a legacy where you have monitoring, of course, of species that that community is interested in. So we can gather data that way. And I do think that it's a challenge, but I think that is actually an opportunity that we need to explore more.
That's a great point. Angelo, is there a lot of citizen science projects in Brazil? Do you find? Is there community science a common phenomenon?
There are a lot of projects of citizen science here, but based in online platforms, mainly focusing on the charismatic groups. Dragonflies is a candidate, but we don't have specific projects on dragonflies. Many of the projects are focused, for example, in birds. But talking about insects, I have the same feeling. We have this data, but we don't have robust or analysis. And here in Brazil, my colleagues working with bees have a unique opportunity based on our collections because the collection have material collect along or during the last 70 years. So they are analyzed the composition of fauna based on bees, solitary bees, not bees in colonies, social bees, and they detected the communities change a lot. For example, half of diversity changed for common species, widespread species, not the local and native species. But it is a unique opportunity based in a single group. We don't have for most of group of insects these long-term monitoring projects that allows to analyze this data. So we don't know what is happened. You know that a lot of deforestation. We have the effects of urbanization over the community of insects, but I don't know, but the question is how it's affect our research here in Global South. I don't know. It's a very difficult question. So we are discussing more about insect decline than how it's affect our research. I think it's opportunity of research for future projects and looking for answer these questions that we have talking here.
I didn't. Can I speak?
Please.
I was just thinking, when Eric talked about how it affects the research, and I was going to give an example. For instance, when you do the collection of butterflies, and of course, the butterflies are going into extinction, right? Like they are already in decline. But we don't have sufficient data to tell which species and which one isn't. So the only thing we can do is just make collections of these butterflies and then try to identify them, because there's no other way. I mean, over here though, we could do the genome, but then it's so expensive, so we can't do that. And then when you do collect these butterflies, you're actually adding to the problem. You're reducing the population of the butterflies, and eventually, if you're trying to write this as a paper or something, some people feel you're actually causing more decline by collecting all these butterflies instead of just doing some maybe field research, taking photographs and all that. But then you can't really tell taking just photographs. You need to collect them, and then you're adding to the problem, reducing the population. And this one way, that's something I don't know how to resolve that problem, because we don't have the data, we don't have the names. Like if I take pictures, I might do some wrong identification of the insects. And then we can do the insect genome because we don't have sufficient funding for such, doing the identification using maybe DNA or doing some other stuff. So the only thing we could do is make collections, and that's not good. So that's the way it's affecting my research, because I don't know how to resolve that.
It's a challenge, most definitely. Well, I guess we could kind of flip the coin on its head, I guess, and switch to our third question. We've kind of it seems like what I'm hearing amongst the panelists is an interest and passion and desire to understand the fauna of your regions, but challenges that make it very difficult from long-term, challenges setting up long-term monitoring, permitting, storage and maintenance of collections, and so on. But here's a fun question then. What are the things that you like most about working in the region where you work? What are the things, I mean, others have, you've already mentioned, you know, the great biodiversity that's in your region, but what are some of the other things that make being, you know, a member of the Global South and working in the Global South that you actually love, that it makes you want to get up in the morning? Who'd like to start? Priya, you're smiling. I'll ask you.
I love the people. I love the people that I work with. I am fortunate that I work with amazing people at the Biodiversity Center like Eric. And it's wonderful because I work with people that are passionate about what they do, and they're wonderful not just at work, you know, at the university and as we share courses and things like that. They're wonderful in the field too. So, you know, it's a community that we have here. Guyana has less than 800,000 people. I have less than 1 million people. So we are a very small community. And so working with everyone, you know, we work with the university, but we also work with the Wildlife Commission. I recently did some work with them actually looking at butterfly biodiversity. And they're a fantastic group. You know, we work closely with the EPA. We work closely, you know, so quite a few agencies, and even the non-governmental agencies like WWF Guyana and things like that. These are all places that we work. Very small community, and it's a fantastic. And I think one of the things is, you know, everyone will say, "Oh yeah, you're partial," but one of the things that I love about what I do, is just one of my first field trips that I ever went out. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I went out and I saw the rainforest and I saw the savannas, and our savannas are so fantastic because you look out into these large expanses of land and it looks as if the world ends. And you have, you know, Jessica you can attest to this. You can attest to what the Rupununi savannas look like. And you know, it's not just the beautiful butterflies that we have, but we have some of the most amazing megafauna, from, you know, your harpy eagles to your anacondas to your black caimans to your jaguars. I mean, and this is just on a regular basis. And so I'm very fortunate to work within a country, as you know, within biodiversity such as Guyana. And honestly, it's the people and the animals. I can't complain. Thank you.
Any other, that's wonderful. Any other things that people like about working in their region? Melissa?
Well, as Priya said, is wonderful. And when I went to Guyana, for me, it was like it was being at home, but being in a foreign land. Because that's like, there's so most things that we shared in terms of biodiversity, so much of the ecosystems. And Colombia, it's just situated strategically in South America in terms like between the Central America and the South America. So you can kind of see all this breadth of different amazing ecosystems from the Paraná. So if you like the cold, you can go and freeze yourself up high in the mountains. And if you like the rainforest, you can go down and sweat as hell. If you want to see the big savannas, you can do it. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I love to go out. And every time that I go out, know that there's something else that I have not seen before. That for me, I mean, when I go to the States or I go to this, I mean, I love the amount of the abundance of things that you see flying in just one summer. Is just abundant. But in the tropics, you just go and you are like, your eyes trying to see things that are like tiny, small, and you're just looking to these little things and just knowing that maybe what you're seeing, nobody else have seen it before, because that happens all the time. So I think that sense of wonder and discovery is absolutely exciting. And I just love the people as well. I mean, for me, I always been between the United States and Colombia. I worked here for 5 years and I recently moved back to the States, but my heart is like here. I do anything and everything to keep working and promoting science and keep working with students here because they need to get trained, they need to get the knowledge. And for most now, I have come to realize that as president, we need to work with the communities. The communities need to own their biodiversity. They need to see how cool it is, all these bugs, how wonderful is everything that they can teach us, and how it's a seed of inspiration for anything that you want to do in your life. So this is the reason that I created a festival that is coming in a couple of weekends here, because I wanted to use art, films, photographs, illustrations, people out there that not necessarily are entomologists, but they can use insects as an inspiration for whatever they do. And I think that's important because at the end of the day, the community, the population is the one that is going to make the decisions of where going to be the funding is. And if we don't educate our students, our people, into what biodiversity means, into why it is important that that bug is here, or why do we need to be careful if these bugs come to us, in terms of our own populations. If people are not aware of this, it's going to be complicated. And we have to also have the fact that one thing happens in our urban setups. Bogota is a city with more than 9 million people living here. So it's way bigger than whole Guyana, and this is one people that live in the city of Bogota might not have the same sense of biodiversity that someone that lives in the middle of the rainforest, or maybe it's a farmer up in the high elevation mountains. So acknowledging that their thoughts, their knowledge, whatever they perceive of insects and how they perceive it, it's going to be very important in terms of how do we move forward in terms of conservation, how we do our citizen science programs, and how we change those perceptions and make them positive over time, so we can actually put the community on our side as scientists and make our scientific work more valuable for the community, and kind of change into our governments that we are just need to publish impact factors with funding that is never going to get us to that impact factor, and make us competitive with the global north, because we can never, like, from here, being here, we are doing things with our nails. We are like making things happen at a genomics level, at everything, with like scratching the last bit of money that it changes so rapidly because we have a tax, exchange rate. So today you have this money and tomorrow you have less, or things like that. And that's something that is our daily kind of workout all the time. But I think that's important.
Well, that's actually a really good segue. I'd love to hear, maybe Angelo, we'll start with you. What Melissa and kind of Priya have touched upon is the excitement of working in the Global South, but you also both mentioned kind of working with people, and some of the people that you're working with aren't from the Global South. There's many people, myself included, from up north who come to parts of the Global South to do biodiversity research. So that comes with a lot of complicated scenarios that can occur. So Angelo, maybe we'll start with you, and I'll ask, what advice would you have for folks who are working in the Global South to maintain equity when you're doing international collaboration, so that you still are an integral part of the research and your ideas are heard? Do you have any advice you might share?
Very easy question, another very easy question. So I will return the last question because I share the same feeling about it, because most here are privileged in living in mega diverse countries. For example, Brazil is huge as a continent, but specifically here, when I live, in the place I live, even being far away from the famous Amazonia, a few kilometers from my campus, a remnant of Atlantic Forest, for example, into a single expedition, we obtain new primary data from on biodiversity, including many new species for many groups of insects. This is amazing. But the system here, not promoting this, I don't know it's the correct term, but science of basic science, for example, taxonomy, systematics, but must focus it on other fields of scientific research. Just a short comment. But this is your question is very difficult. I think I try to be optimist. It's not my profile. I tending to be more pessimist. But the scientific endeavor is a collaborative by essence, and naturally to establish. Okay. A collaboration around the world is welcome. Sometimes the only way to conduct some expensive types of research. Maybe, I don't know, we have a lot of bureaucracy about biodiversity now. Anyway, I think that global protocols, for example, the Nagoya protocols that providing for sharing of benefits would be a great advance, because the nations that have this mega diversity can receive some back for your biodiversity. But how minimize this imbalance or promote the equity? It's very difficult. I don't know. I don't have a question specifically. The problem I see is the collaboration among the global south and north-south. Most of times, the people or the colleagues from global south lost the protagonism. They are not more leading or not leaders of your research. That is a problem. But I think the scenario is changing. That we are here, for example, we're discussing this topic today. So I will be optimistic with the future about this question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think what we can do more of is sort of funding local studies in the global south and maybe provide more training. So maybe you from the north don't have to travel to the south to do data collection, but you can have the data collection done locally, and the information can be sent to you because you've trained that person, you know that they're capable of doing such and can get accurate data to you. And I think more funding in terms of grants and scholarships for these training activities and supporting local research is also needed, because at times in country the work may not be supported either by the university or the government because they see no vested interest in it, and it's hard to get funding sometimes for these things.
Yeah. Alafia, how about for you in Nigeria? Do you have any advice for doing international collaborations with people so that I like the word that you used, Angelo, be just to maintain to still be a protagonist in your own story, in your own research story? How do you kind of give any advice for international collaboration?
So, basically, most of the collaborations have really ended in sometimes in sour stories because of the nature of some of our researchers here. You know, when it comes to funding and stuff like that, sometimes the use of the fund and all that. So I would advise that the advice would come basically to some of our folks here to ensure that whenever the funds are actually given, you do what you're expected to do with it and not using some other, some other form, because this would not encourage collaboration henceforth, and that's going to affect our upcoming entomologists and whatever research we would like to do. On the aspect of the getting a trend, because I think this is a very, very important factor. We don't have data for getting the trend. One of the ways by which you can do this is if you get a collaborator that is ready to not just fund, but is more interested in just, okay, you collect and let me have some of them. We're going to do the work. this would really go a long way, because most of the time the research we are interested in carrying the research, maybe lack of funding, and then the preservative methods and all that is some of the problems that is really causing is some of the issues that is causing problems. So with a collaborator that is ready, that really understands, maybe you need to understand what some of our problems are, so that would help in carrying on with whatever research we're. And just like Eric was saying, like the government is not really interested in some of these insects, except for those that maybe, even those that are of agricultural importance, has to be maybe the one on the hip of the issue. For example, presently in Nigeria, tuta absoluta, that's a moth, it's a problem, and that's what the government, and then maybe bed bugs. And so that's what the government's really interested in. Anything other than that, they're not interested in it. So sometimes it becomes a problem getting a collaborator that wants to fund research that the government is not interested in. And so these are some of the problems, but we're hopeful. We get some collaborators that are quite like Jessica, and they have been very wonderful. And with time, we'll continue to build this relationship so that you can get your trust, because with that, we're sure to continue with and carry on with very good projects that would make more value. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's interesting. We heard in the States here, at least, there was a lot of news about bed bugs being a hot topic in Paris, and we didn't hear about that in Lagos. So I'd love to, after I'll have to ask you more about what they're doing for the bed bugs control in Nigeria. Melissa, Priya, any others have thoughts about advice that you might have for folks working in the global north to kind of help, kind of maintain protagonism, maintain equity in the research projects? Maybe Priya, could we start with you?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I have found, in addition to training, is involvement from the beginning. So as you are developing the proposal, the team that you'll be working with locally is involved in that process. And that does two main things. One of the things that it does is that, we are exposed to the entire process of proposal writing and, getting the grants up there and things like that. So we build capacity and confidence and things like that. But in addition to that, we also have an input into what is important to us nationally. And that is very important, because when you come down to do that research, it is both the institutes in both countries that are benefiting from it, and they're doing so equally. It's not just one focus. So I think that's very important. Of course, when you come down and you work with us, and there's much training and things like that, we are fortunate in Guyana where for our research permits and our export permits, it states what needs to come back to the country. So we do have that safeguard in place. But I think what's very also important is what happens after. So the analysis of those data and the writing of the scientific material. Lots of times we are involved in the field work, and we're trained in the field work, and that's fantastic. But then we're not involved when it comes to the genomic work, or we're not involved when it comes to the statistical analysis. And then, the paper comes out, and, our names will be in the paper, or it isn't, it just, and we're not even involved in the writing of that scientific paper. So that also creates a problem within the country. And because of that, we don't develop, it's not just about the skills, it's about being able to develop the confidence so that you can be an independent researcher within your country from the beginning, which is developing that idea that you have all the way to publication. So I think, what Eric would have said is very important, but I think on the two ends of the beginning and, getting to that end of that academic circle, I think those are also very important to maintain, to ensure that, there is equity when you think about data collection and the publishing of this material.
That's an excellent point. Melissa?
Yeah, well, that's great. I agree with all of you. I think what Priya is saying is really important. I think that's the main issue, and that kind of big, kind of complicated thing that makes it hard for people to collaborate. I think when you are settling an idea to work in the global south, use the networks that you have to get to the position where you work with institutions that can provide, like if you're gonna do a proposal that have PhD students, promote also kind of research for undergraduate master students that are based in these countries. You know, that they could also have like help develop the project, they are involved, they feel ownership for it. Not because there's some things that I've seen where like, yes, they come work, do field work here, they pay for some of local researchers to help attain the data, the collection data, but then the paper, as Priya said, is written and done by others, and they might be not authors or in the acknowledgements. And why wouldn't they get the same training, the same scientific, you know, opportunity to collaborate, to make a comment, you know? So when you're trying to do that, think about what the other person and the other end needs. And I think if you have it in the process of when you're starting, as in the process proposal and all of this, that's very important to see what is needed. What is needed from us? Do we need to do fieldwork? Do we need bioinformatic workshops? Do they need what kind of training? Because we might be in different ways depending on what exactly we're focusing in. You know, Brazil has a lot of ability to get a lot of DNA work. Colombia as well, in terms of lab work. So we can produce PCRs. We can produce everything like that. So will that be like, what do we need here? Like assess that kind of information and bring the people on board. We need to feel active part of the project, not something that, not like a tool to get you to get to this point. No, we need to be part of the whole process. And I think that's important. So think about the training. Who are you training? If you can do undergraduates, so something that it's going to build biologists or conservation biologists or systematics or taxonomists in country, that's going to be a powerful way to collaborate. Another thing that I think is very important right now and nowadays is we can produce this in different languages. We can have these meetings so everybody can participate in their own language, because why do we need to feel us uncomfortable by speaking our minds because we don't speak English? So people, that just putting that barrier makes it complicated. Sometimes people it's uncomfortable to kind of give you information, just not because they don't want to, it's just because they feel that they cannot be understand, or that you're gonna there's so many barriers at that personal level that hinders sometimes collaboration. So why don't you think about communicating with us in our own language? Why don't we bring all of this together? Why don't give us the opportunity to publish whatever your research in our language as well? Because that's something that journals are, or some of them are actually working towards making it available. Some of them are fighting back, but I think it's pretty good to have like a copy, because that's going to make it accessible, not just for us and scientists, but to the citizens of our own countries. And if they need that, they can actually see what we're doing. We're not speaking in this English that, and like some of these people don't have the access to that language. So that makes it fair, that makes it a little bit more equal, because at this point, the only people that have access to a lot of the scientific knowledge that we have produced is people that speak English. And that, so who are we giving this information to at the end? Not to the people of the global south. And I think that's something that we need to start reconsidering and think about. And when we create collaborations, we need to think about and kind of give that highlight or that opportunity to build real collaborations where all people seem to have the same opportunity to contribute and collaborate. And I think that there's a lot of move towards that, but there's still a long way to keep working to it.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you all for this conversation. I really like the word that Priya used to kind of gain confidence. Confidence, I think, is something that we all can identify with as people who have written papers. I remember my first paper, my advisor said it was terrible, but it was good to learn, and he sat with me and helped me work through it. It's a skill that you have to learn. And I think, I would love to have, I'm sure all of us would love to be able to see our, things published in the languages that we speak, Makushi papers and what have you. So I think this is a really good point, Melissa, and I really appreciate all the comments from Alafia, Angelo, Eric. This has been a really great conversation, and I would like to thank our panelists for giving their time and speaking with us about some of these topics, which are, as Angelo said, hard topics and complicated. We have recorded this webinar and it will be available via YouTube. And for those who are interested, if you want to find out more about the type of work that's happening with this National Science Foundation RCN grant that's led by Christy Belay, Chris Elphick, Eliza Grames, Dave Wagner, myself, and Matt Forrester, you can check out the EntoGem website. Dave, Eliza, Christy, Chris, is there anything else that anyone would like to say from the grant team? No.
Just thank you very much to all the panelists. That was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
So next webinar, you can find out more information. If you're interested in finding out more about the webinar series, we can be added to our mailing list to get updates about insect decline and the work that's being done. To Dr. Maharaj, Pinto, Stoll, Aziza, and Sanchez, Herrera. Hopefully we will all continue to have meaningful long-term collaborations with you. And we really value the work that you're doing. I admire you all as entomologists and people. So thank you so much for today. And thanks to everyone who tuned in.